Hello, my name is Guilherme and I help engineers to be high-performing project managers. This content is part of the warm-up for the project management journey. The project management journey is an event I'm going to make where I'm going to talk about steps to further develop your career into project management. So if you're interested in that, click in the link in the description here and subscribe. The event is free. The content will be available for the project management journey only during the week, so don't miss it. The topic I'm going to discuss today is stakeholder management. This is stakeholder management, of course, is usually a very challenging topic in any type of project. First, we start to keep stakeholders happy. It's not only a matter to keep the project on time and on budget. There's of course more things involved there. And why is so challenging? Well, because every person is different. And so every different stakeholder, they're going to have different backgrounds, maybe different cultural backgrounds, and they're going to have different ways to see things. And so that's of course when that's one of the reasons why you might have conflict. And each different stakeholder, they might have a different thing they want from the project. For example, I've worked with stakeholders that they did not want to know almost anything about the project. For some of those stakeholders, they only want to know if it is on time, on track. That would be okay, unless there's other problem that I should have that I need to discuss and escalate. They do not want to know it. They just like go and do your thing, as long as you keep everything on cost and on track. But I also work with other stakeholders that they really want to get involved here, yeah, basically the day-to-day of the project. And when I'm talking about stakeholders, because stakeholders, it's basically anyone impacted by the project, then it can be very broad. And of course, when I'm talking about stakeholder management, what you're going to do, you're going to focus on the most relevant stakeholders. Not that the other stakeholders don't matter, but some people, they do not have power, they do not have a say, they don't have any influence in the project. So how to manage those different people? Uh, what you need to understand there, you need to try to see a bit on the stakeholder perspective, their point of view and their background. Because I mentioned, like, sometimes you have a director, that's your maybe the maybe he's also kind of the sponsor for the project, but he's not directly involved on there. And you can imagine that if you're working on a company that are executing a lot of projects, that the director, the PMO director, I don't know, general manager, whatever you want to call it, he does not want to get involved in other projects. And I understand, of course, you have the theory, how you're going to map requirements and so on. But sometimes you do not have the chance to talk with this person one on one simply because he's too high in the organization. And you can imagine if the organization has, I don't know, 20, 30, 100 projects, he's not going to talk with all the project managers. That's not handy. Then you're not going to have a chance to have an interview to check requirements. And of course, you're hoping that most of the stakeholders' requirements, they are in line with the process from the company, but not necessarily. And of course, you can have other stakeholders that they might have a big influence in the project, like resource managers, depending on the type of organization that you are working on. And you need to get involvement with these people in different levels, with different types of communication. And of course, for some of those stakeholders, it's also about the frequency of the communication. Because I've worked with stakeholders, as I mentioned, that if I communicate once a month that everything is okay, that's what I want to know. They do not care about the details. But I also work with people that they want to get like a customer. They want to get involved in almost daily basis what you're doing. And this is a situation that can get really difficult because you can imagine if it's your customer, you can you can simply not push back like that, say now you're not going to get involved because the customer is one of your main stakeholders and you need to make sure that he's engaged, but also you need to make sure that your customer is not taking over the project because in the end you are executing something to the customer, but also you need to make sure that the company interests are taken into consideration. Why I'm talking about also company interests? Because, for example, I've worked with energy and construction projects, and most of those projects I worked on, we had a fixed price, like it was a full turnkey, and we had a fixed price with a fixed scope. In one of the several projects that I worked on, and there was a customer in particular, they always want me to help them with a lot of stuff, with some changes, with some extra work. The problem is, if I have a fixed cost, more work that I'm going to do that's outside of my scope, that means more cost for my project. And you also can imagine that I do not have a lot of extra resource just hanging around, just waiting to, to support whatever happens. And then of course, besides on the top of cost, if I deviate resources from what I need to execute, I might delay also my project, which in this case it had very heavily contractual penalties. Then you really need to find the right balance there because you do not want to say no to everything that the customer is asking you. And of course, ideally, you always want to find a way to support, but you cannot say yes to everything because saying yes to everything it means that a lot of scope creep, a lot of extra costs. You might be endangering the timeline, and in the end, the customer will not be happy anyway because if you delay the timeline, the customer will not be happy. And then there's also the perspective from the company that you are working on, that you are there as a project manager also to guarantee the profitability of the project. And doing a lot of extra work does not help with your profitability. Your budget is the same. So it can be a very tricky situation. And with a lot of different customers, you find different ways to handle it. Because for some customers, like they understand, they have more awareness about the situation that you also have the role that you need to play there, and sometimes it's conflicting. It's you have a conflict of interest there. Then you have another customers that they just think that I'm the customer. You need to do whatever I say, and I can tell you that's a very difficult situation, and you need to try to manage. Then it's first making sure that you have a very clear communication, even if it's no or yes, but don't let anything hanging there to any stakeholders assume. If it's bad news, deliver the bad news. If the customer is mad, let the customer be mad. But of course, be professional, be respectful, but that's also your job. As a project manager, you also need to know how to deliver bad news. And if it's an important stakeholder, it's not always happy, it's not always nice and not always pretty, but it's your job to do that. So transparency is very important, but also clear communication. Because if you are transparent and you have a clear communication there, you are going to build trust in the relationship with any stakeholder. And even though if it's something that they do not like it, like a customer is asking you to do something, then you are saying, no, I'm not going to do that because I cannot do that like that. Then if you have this trust relationship, they will understand. They might not like it, of course, but they will understand. And I also mentioned in the beginning that only cost and time does not mean that you're going to keep the stakeholders happy. Why? Because there's a lot of other things that can change and can go around the project that might not be right away directly reflecting the cost or time of the project, but they might then influence the customer satisfaction. They might create problems for they might create issues for the future. It might increase risk what you are doing, and there's several other things that you need to take into consideration. So that's why important when you are working with stakeholder management, you need to put yourself in this person's position and try to understand why they are seeing the things the way they are seeing. And why I'm saying putting themselves in their position. Sometimes, depending on the stakeholder, you have the chance to talk with the person. Say, I've seen that you are concerned about this topic. Can you help me to understand your perspective? Can you help me to understand your point of view? What can I do to make you more comfortable with this situation? And that's something that you can do. But if it's a stakeholder, as I mentioned, it's the general manager from the company, from a business area. Well, if you're the project manager, uh, depending of course on the company and the country, but usually you do not get access to those people so freely. Meaning, if you have a chain of command there, people will not like it if you just go directly to him to talk about that. And then, of course, there's other stakeholders that you need to learn how to manage. So, thinking on those different positions from those different stakeholders and from different perspectives, it's very important because any project you're going to have several stakeholders. A lot of times they are in conflict, and of course the project will suffer from that. But what you need to try to figure out is how you're going to manage the situation. And you need to count, of course, when I'm talking about managing situation, managing conflicts, I'm assuming, of course, you're working with reasonable people because there's a smaller percentage of all people there that's people that you should not work on, and that's also something that you cannot manage. But in general, people are like understanding. Of course, sometimes they're under pressure, sometimes they have different interests, but that's how you try to understand. So if it's a stakeholder that you have a relationship that you can reach more freely, you can do that. You can talk with this person. But always keep in mind that if you're going for high levels in the organization, you might upset a lot of other stakeholders in this path. So it's important, for example, I want to talk with the general manager. Well, depending how much levels do you have between you and this person, you need to talk with all the levels before you get there. Because I can tell you, if you just go to the general manager room and say, hey, can I talk with you? And you start a discussion without informing anyone, you're going to upset and you're going to create more conflict with other stakeholders, which also might not help you to solve. You might solve this problem, you might create another fight. So it's always important to understand those levels that you need to take to talk with stakeholders. But general stakeholders that are usually very influential in your project, it's the customer. If you're executing a project for a customer, you might see an internal, external customer. That's always important. Usually for the customer, you have a counterpart there, and hopefully it's someone that you can have from time to time a bit more open and honest discussions. You can have, if you're working like in a matrix organization, resource managers. They are all assigning resource for your project, and it's very important that you try to keep those people aware. And then, of course, there are directors, there are your team members. Usually, of course, your team members, it's much easier to reach out and have an open discussion. But when you go for a higher level, it starts to be difficult. And why I'm saying it's usually try to understand the reason why people they have their concern or they are behaving like that in a certain position. Because I've seen sometimes you say, okay, I'm on track, but I'm on cost, but the market situation changed. Then I've worked in a project that because of a big change in the market, the forecast, the number of pieces that the project's supposed to sell, it dropped like in 60%, then a lot of stakeholders were not happy. But yeah, I was on track on cost. But then of course, that create a lot of other discussions if the project should continue or not. But that's something that you need to understand, because that's something that you need to try to tackle, manage it, and decide how to move forward. Because in the end, if you don't have a business case there, then that's the first question. Okay, the volumes drop 60%. Do you have a business case? If no, they might cancel the project. Or if there's a customer involved there, that you might have a different type of discussion with this customer. But everything that you need to be prepared. Market situations like volume drop, you might get extra competition that also happened with me in one of my projects. Then we were expecting to be the first one. Suddenly there was another competitors head to head to try to launch the product first. Then of course, even though we were on time, there was a request saying you need to go faster because we need to be the first in the market. Then there's a lot of pressure to pull in the timeline. And how those things will affect the type of feedback you get. Because on the top of that, and of course, as I mentioned, there's a lot of cultural change. If you're working with a lot of different cultures from people from different countries, in all those different countries, they're expecting to communicate in a different way, and they deliver messages in very different ways. For example, years ago, I was working already here in the Netherlands with a project with a factory in Mexico. And then we had something, there was an extra cost and someone had to pay for that. But there was something that the project had to be done there. And in this case, I believe was the quality manager or the planning manager say, but yeah, but who would pay for that? Or something that was not a direct ask for the project to pay. But also I'm from Latin America, I'm from Brazil. Then I read him and say he's asking us to pay for that. Then I was just say, okay, we pay for that. Then it was clear, but also talking with other people, like my manager here, he was a Dutch manager at the time. He would not understand, say, what he's saying, what's this discussion about? I was like, he's asking us to pay for that. Because of my different cultural background, for me was very clear. But in Netherlands, it was not clear. Then you can imagine how much communication can affect just because of the cultures and the way to ask stuff. And of course, it's not easy, because if you do not know the other culture, until you get familiarized with that, there's always a learning curve. But that's something also to keep in mind while you're talking about stakeholder management. You need to understand those differences in culture, because in the end, they are going to affect how they communicated, what they expect from you, how direct they expect you to be, and even in levels that's saying that for some other companies that I worked on, the director would tell me to do something that was not feasible for my project. I would say, no, sorry, that's not possible. I cannot do that. And he was annoyed in the situation, because for him, his culture was like, if I'm telling you to do the thing, something, I'm the boss. You need to do it. And my point was, yeah, even if I want, I cannot do it, because he was asking something like, I'm going to change the law. That's not possible to change the law for my project. So having this awareness, that's what's going to help you to have a better stakeholder management. So transparency, clear communication, just make sure that you understand that clear communication will depend a lot on the culture. Some things that you are going to say, yeah, that's very clear for me, it will not be clear for all cultures. And in some places, something that's okay, clear for you, will be considered very rude in other cultures. And the other thing is, of course, if you are working with people for longer, you start to know and learn how they work. But for the stakeholders that you do not have really this direct contact, because several reasons, or you cannot have exactly this open discussion because whatever reason. Even though try to see this person perspective, or even depending, hopefully you have a manager, you have a good relationship with your manager, try to ask him. I say, I think this person is concerned with that, before going directly there in the higher level. What do you think is this concern? What else do you think we should do? Also ask for advice. You can talk with your colleagues and so on. That helps. Of course, I'm not telling you to go and ask for everyone advice. It depends a bit on the relationship you have with those different people. Most, I think, in all the places I've worked on, there's always one or two peers that you have a more closer relation, where you can have a more open discussion, and you can get a different perspective. And you also a different perspective, and you can also ask feedback, because sometimes people say, no, I think your perspective, I think your point of view is wrong because this and that. And then say, yeah, but in that point of view, what this stakeholder or what this director is asking from me, it makes sense. I was not seeing something like that. So I mentioned that stakeholder management is not simple because in general there is no formula that you're going to, there's no formula, a ready formula to manage people, right? There's no formula that's just ready to say, do this, and that, and you are going to build a relationship with a person, because people are different, uh, and that's normal. With some people, you are going to get close really fast. With some other people, you are barely going to exchange few words in a year. That's normal. That's how it goes. But that's why its stakeholder management usually can be very challenging depending on the situation. But whatever the challenges that you're going to face, again, transparency, clear communication, make sure that you're aware of cultural difference, and try to get information. Try to put yourself in this person's shoes, try to look for his or her perspective, and try to get feedback. And while you are getting feedback from those people that you have a better relationship, you are going to be able to see a lot of stuff. It might be that this person that you are asking for advice, they know this stakeholder from longer time because they worked together in the past. Or it might be that the person just say, yeah, I see things exactly like you, I do not understand the reason. Then you say, okay, then you might decide to discuss this with your manager. But what's important, do not make assumptions. Because if you're assuming something without checking the information, that's usually how communication goes wrong. And if communication is going wrong, sooner or later stakeholder management will also go wrong. So it's a kind of combination. That's also why some areas of project management, they are not it's not so much a hard skill, but starts to be a very soft skill, because you need to juggle around. And what's important in all this journey, that again, you are focusing on yourself, focusing on what you control, what you can control. You need to make sure that you are always respectful with people, that even though if you are annoyed with something, just be aware that you are treating people with respect, not yelling with people. It's not okay. So you need to treat everyone with respect. And of course, you can have harsh discussions. That likely it's part of the game, but how you manage those things is quite important. And in the end, more you're going to do it, more you're going to learn. And more you work with the same people, more you're going to build relationships. And with some people, you're going to build relationships that they are going to last for years, even though you stop to work together. And with some people, it will just, you build a relationship while you work together, and sometimes you're not going to be in touch with this person maybe for years or maybe for the rest of your life. And that's okay. Because again, uh, people are different. And that's part of it. In the end, it's a good thing. It's very good that people are different. Otherwise, we would be bored to hell. But understanding it and keeping this in mind will help. Not looking only on cost and time also will help. Try to understand what are the different variables for the project. Like maybe it's launching the product first, maybe it's a customer satisfaction, maybe there's another challenge that you do not know, there's another risk that you do not know. Like sometimes if you're working on construction project like health, safety, environment, those things are very important. You cannot just jump around and say, but I'm a cost and I need to do this fast. No, sometimes it's not an option. You cannot risk people's life to do something faster. So understanding the different variables that can influence that already help you to understand that's not only cost and time. And of course, if you are aware of those variables, it also helps you to see things in the perspective of the different stakeholders. And sometimes it will take time, so you get to know someone better and you adjust the way of work and also the communication. Some people they are going to love to get a very detailed email. Some people they like maximum one line and they want to have a meeting. Different ways to work. What's important here that you have this awareness that it needs to be different for every different person, for every different stakeholder. And if something is not going so smoothly, try to understand why. What's going on here? Is there any one of the other variables that they are seeing there? Is there a different thing that there are different risks that they are foreseeing that I do not know? Ask for different perspective from peers, but always make sure that you are transparent. And if it's yes, you can do something, yes. And if it's no, it needs to be a no. It does not matter who is asking for. Of course, if you're saying no for general manager, for CEO, for your customer, uh, before doing that, make sure that you investigate all the possibilities. And if it's really no, at least come up with an option. Otherwise, you might get a harder time in trying to explain something. But again, that's managing expectations. Stakeholder management is a lot about managing expectations. How you're going to manage your expectations, being transparent with clear communication, what can be done and what cannot be done. I hope you like this content. Let me know what you think about that. Feel free also to ask questions here in the comments, or you also can send me a message with your question. If you like the comment, click the button like. If you think that people would like also to see it, please share. That also helps me. If you're interested to get more content, follow my page, my channel on YouTube, but also follow my page on Instagram. On Instagram, sharing daily content on project management, and also the Q&A box is always open every day there. So if you have a question, you can just ask me a question there in the Q&A about project management, leadership, or you can ask about even my experience if you want. Again, this is content, it's the part of the warm-up for the project management journey. If you are starting with project management, or if you want to start with project management, or even if you do not have experience, I suggest you to subscribe to the project management journey, where I'm going to show you the steps to start to develop your career and to progress there. This event is intended for people that want to start or are starting working with project management like for a few years, and I want to be there to make sure that I can add value for your career and to support you in your journey. I hope you like the content, and I hope I'm going to see you in the project management journey.